question was, can we dig more into the 4 components of emotional intelligence? Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked. I think first, before we get into that conversation, it's important to understand the difference between IQ and EQ. IQ measures your cognitive ability, right? So when you think about head, when you think about being able to reason, problem solving, analytical skills, things like that. And for the most part, once you get to a certain level, that's kind of stuck with it. That's why there are babies who can be certified as geniuses, because we're kind of born with that, right? But the EQ is about your emotional and social skills. It's about emotional reasoning. It's about your ability to manage relationships, to manage yourself. So think IQ is head, EQ is heart. We don't spend a lot of time focusing on EQ. And I think that's part of the problem, particularly when we are navigating relationship dynamics, when we're navigating interpersonal skills. And there are some people who don't have the components of emotional intelligence. All right, so there are 4 components to emotional intelligence. The very first and the baseline component of that is self-awareness. And here's the thing about self-awareness as it relates to people and emotional intelligence. Most people don't realize how much they don't know themselves. We assume that because we've lived with ourselves all of our lives, that we know what's going on in our heads, that we know ourselves, but we don't really know ourselves as well as we think we do. And that's why I often speak of becoming a student of yourself. That means not only learning the former version of you, the past version of you, but also allowing space to understand how the future version of you may move. That means not putting yourself in a box of saying, oh, I would never, because as soon as you say you will never, you will end up in a circumstance where you'll end up nevering like never before. Self-awareness is really about learning what your traumas are, what your triggers are, when you are blaming others, when you are accepting responsibility and accountability for your own actions, what stuff is yours and what stuff is other people's, which is why I don't fret when people come on the internet trying to tell me who I am, because my level of self-awareness is elite, because I spend a lot of time being introspective about myself and my life in the context of what has happened. With that being said, I also am not foolish enough to believe that I know myself down pat, because there are still experiences that we have not had that will show us more about ourselves. And along with that self-awareness is recognizing that you don't know yourself as well as you think you know yourself, and being okay with that. A lot of people are not okay with that. A lot of people assume that they know themselves better than they know themselves, and then they get in situations that prove that they absolutely don't. Next, on top of the self-awareness, is self-management. How do you handle yourself? How do you handle your emotions? Are you popping off? Are you being triggered by things that you don't understand? And that's the part of emotional regulation. I know that there are very few situations that I will be put in where I'm going to crash out, because I am reflective, right? I may intentionally respond, but there are very few places and spaces that I will crash out, because my emotional self-management allows me to check in with myself and check out of situations as deemed necessary. Now, that don't mean I might not pull a card every once in a while. That might not mean that I might do some of those things that won't seem seemly, but there are other things that I know you won't catch me doing, because I have a great degree of self-management, emotional self-management, because I have self-awareness. Self-awareness says that if somebody is picking on me on the internet, I know that it's likely them and not me. If they're coming at me about a perceived flaw that they believe that I have, because I have the awareness of whatever that issue is and I've accepted it, now I don't respond. I'm able to manage it because it's not a trigger, right? I've unclipped my triggers. I find myself untriggerable in a lot of places and spaces because I know myself. And because I know myself, it's easier to manage myself. Make sense? Self-awareness, self-management. The third component of emotional intelligence is social awareness. That has a lot to do with empathy, picking up context clues, understanding when other people are experiencing emotions that require empathy, that require the capacity to acknowledge someone else outside of yourself, being the type of person or people who can read a room emotionally, if you know what I'm saying. The emotional, the social awareness of other people requires a level of empathy. Empathy can be a muscle. A lot of people have not practiced empathy, particularly in the online space, because it's easy to just get on and vomit all the things that you desire without any consequences. And so if we've not done the work to develop empathy, or we're not naturally empathetic people, then we can really come off as total jerks. And that happens a lot in real life and in the virtual world, because people have not done the work. The next component after that, if you don't have social awareness, it's hard for you to have relationship management. There are people who, because they don't know themselves, they don't comport themselves well, they don't handle their own emotions well. Because they don't handle their own emotions well, they throw that on other people. They don't see other people. They're so focused on themselves that it makes it difficult for them to navigate interpersonal relationships. It makes it difficult for them to build healthy connections, which is why I can assert that anyone who's coming on the internet and picking at me, right? I am assuming that your lack of empathy on an online space also shows up in your real life. Now, some people can fake it till they make it, but when the rubber meets the road, when you start to see that life starts to lifing, these people fall, they fall. They fold, they fall, they don't measure up. And it's not to say that anyone is perfect at all four of those components, but the goal of emotional intelligence is to build it. It's a growth. It's something that you can grow, where your IQ can peak, right? Your IQ can peak. Stress can also decrease your IQ. Don't just think that just because you got a certain IQ, that's the IQ that you're stuck at. Because stress will make you stupid. That has to do with the orbital frontal cortex. And I'm not going to go into that this morning, but your emotional intelligence, if you're willing to lean in and do the work, can grow, can increase. You can get better at intrapersonal relationships with yourself. You can get better at interpersonal relationships. You can become a better contributor to the world by managing and increasing your emotional intelligence. I hope that helped or gave some clarity on that situation. As you can see, I could talk about it all day. I do trainings on this. I go into corporations and train on emotional intelligence and how to increase empathy, how to lean into those places, how to identify triggers, how to disarm triggers. A lot of it has to do with first acknowledging, right? The awareness, acknowledging that there is an issue and then addressing said issue. Personal development. So I love that stuff. Hope that helps. Thanks for the question. And if you have more, please feel free to ask.